Welcome to the Right to Reason, episode 35. Today is December 31st, last day of the year of 2017, and I'm your host, Robert Stanley. I brought you a very special guest today, a criminologist, to talk to us about the culture of violence in America. Are you ready for that? I hope so, because it's happening.
And let me assure you that we are going to take our fight for economic justice, for social justice, for environmental sanity, for a world of peace.
And I think it should be religion treated with ridicule and hatred and contempt. And I claim that right.
One aspect of American U.S. life and culture that I think that does deserve respect and admiration is protection of freedom of speech. The U.S. is unique in the world in that respect.
You're going to spend your whole life preparing to meet the Lord. Boy, you folks are crazy as hell.
The cosmos is also within us. We're made of star stuff. We are a way for the cosmos to know itself.
Quoting the Bible's not going to get you anywhere because you haven't demonstrated why anybody should consider the Bible to be true or authoritative.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Stephen Phelps is known throughout his college campus as a very insightful and controversial instructor. I think he's going to say some things that you were thinking but afraid to say, and maybe even say some things you've never even thought of. Today, he's going to have to answer some very hard questions about mass shootings, gun control, sexual assault, and whether or not the United States is a terrorist country. Before I let him go, I'm also going to ask this criminologist for some tips on how we can avoid becoming victims of crime ourselves. Before we talk to Mr. Phelps, we're going to take a look at the significant events of this year, 2017. We're finishing this year with a kick-ass show, everybody.
Culture is not your friend. Culture is for other people's convenience and the convenience of various institutions, churches, companies.
We very naturally, as a cognitive and behavioral imperative, we form descriptions of the world and we try to figure out what's going on.
If you base the design of rockets on science, they reach the moon. It works. Bitches.
So this is the last day of 2017, and I thought it might be nice to kind of look back at the year, most significant moments. You'll remember most of them. Some of them you might have forgotten. Some of them you might not have even heard about. Let's start with January 20th. I think everybody knows what happened then. Donald Trump is sworn in as the 45th president of the United States of America. Very next day, millions of people worldwide joined the Women's March in response to the inauguration of Donald Trump as the president of the U.S. 420 marches were reported in the U.S. and 168 in other countries. This became the largest single-day protest in American history and the largest worldwide protest in recent history. February 11th, North Korea prompts international condemnation by test-firing a ballistic missile across the Sea of Japan. March 10th, the UN warns that the world is facing the biggest humanitarian crisis since World War II, with up to 20 million people at risk of starvation and famine in Yemen, Somalia, South Sudan, and Nigeria. 29th of the same month, the United Kingdom triggers Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, starting the Brexit negotiations and talks for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union. Then on the 30th, SpaceX conducts the world's first reflight of an orbital-class rocket. April 6th, in response to a suspected chemical weapons attack on a rebel-held town, the U.S. military launches 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles at an airbase in Syria. Russia describes the strike as an aggression, adding they significantly damaged U.S.-Russia ties. April 13th, in the 2017 Nangarhar airstrike, the U.S. drops the GBU-43B Moab, mother of all motherfucking bombs, the world's largest non-nuclear weapon, at an ISIL base in Afghanistan. May 12th, computers around the world are hit by a large-scale ransomware cyber attack, which goes on to affect at least 150 countries. May 22nd, a terrorist bombing attack at an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England kills 22 people and injures over 100. Then we start off June. Amidst wide criticism, the U.S. announces its decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. The 12th of the same month, American student returns home in a coma after spending 17 months in a North Korean prison and dies a week later. Russia and China urge North Korea to halt its missile and nuclear programs after it successfully tested its first intercontinental ballistic missile on the 4th of July. July 7th, the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is voted for by 122 of the 193 UN member states. Just to say that one more time. The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is voted for by 122 countries of the 193 UN member states. Names not on the list include the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, China, India, Russia, France, and of course, yours truly, the United States. That's weird because I'm pretty sure I just named most of the countries that have nuclear weapons. Interesting. August 5th, the UN Security Council unanimously approves fresh sanctions on North Korean trade and investment. August 17th, the first observation of a collision of two neutron stars is hailed as a breakthrough in multi-messenger astronomy when both gravitational and electromagnetic waves from the event are detected. Data from the event provided confirmation of evidence for the R-process theory of the origin of heavy elements like gold. August 24th, a total solar eclipse nicknamed the Great American Eclipse is seen from Pacific all the way to the Atlantic coast of North America. The world didn't end much to the chagrin of many culty religious types and your Uncle Terry, who heard about it on Facebook. In the same month, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights establishes Muslims in Myanmar being killed as a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. August 25th through 30th, Hurricane Harvey strikes the United States as a Category 4 hurricane, causing catastrophic damage to the Houston metropolitan area, mostly due to a record-breaking flood. At least 90 deaths were recorded, and total damage reached $198.6 billion USD, making Harvey the costliest natural disaster in United States history. September 1st, Russian President Vladimir Putin expels 755 diplomats in response to the United States sanctions. On the 3rd, North Korea conducts its sixth and most powerful nuclear test. September 6th through the 10th, the Caribbean and the United States are both struck by Hurricane Irma, Category 5 hurricane, strongest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin outside the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. 134 deaths, $63 billion in damage. September 5th, Cassini ends its 13-year mission by plunging into Saturn, becoming the first spacecraft to enter the planet's atmosphere. September 19th, an earthquake of magnitude 7.1 strikes central Mexico, killing 369 people and leaving thousands more homeless. The 19th through the 20th, just 2 weeks after Irma struck the Caribbean, Hurricane Maria strikes similar areas, making landfall on Dominica as a Category 5 hurricane, and Puerto Rico as a Category 4. Maria caused at least 94 deaths and damages of $103 billion. October 1st, 58 people are killed and 546 injured when Stephen Paddock opens fire on a crowd in Las Vegas, surpassing the 2016 Orlando nightclub shooting as the deadliest mass shooting perpetuated by a lone gunman in the United States. October 12th, the United States announces its decision to withdraw from UNESCO and is immediately followed by Israel. What's that, you ask? Hadn't heard anything about this one in the news, huh? Its declared purpose is to contribute to peace and security by promoting international collaboration through education, scientific, and cultural reforms in order to increase universal respect for justice, the rule of law, and human rights, along with fundamental freedom proclaimed in the United Nations Charter. On October 12th of 2017, the United States notified UNESCO that it will again withdraw from the organization of 195 countries on the 31st of December 2018, and will seek to establish a permanent observer mission beginning in 2019. The Department of State cited mounting arrears at UNESCO, the need for fundamental reform in the organization, and continuing anti-Israel bias. The United States has not paid its $80 million annual UNESCO dues since Palestine became a full member in 2011. Israel and the U.S. were among only 14 votes against the membership of 194 different countries across the world. October 14th, a massive blast caused by a truck bombing in Mogadishu, Somalia, kills at least 512 people and injures 316 others. On the 17th, Syrian civil war, Raqqa is declared fully liberated from the Islamic State of Iraq. October 27th, Catalonia declares its independence from Spain. Catalan Republic is not recognized by the Spanish government or any other sovereign nation. November 2nd, a new species of orangutan is identified in Indonesia. No, it's not Donald Trump. It became the third known species of orangutan, as well as the first great ape to be described for almost a century. On the 12th, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake strikes the border region between Iraq and Iran, leaving at least 530 dead. Did you even hear about that? And over 70,000 people homeless. That's insane. Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe is placed under house arrest as the military take control of the country of Zimbabwe. A Leonardo da Vinci painting, Salvator Mundi, sells for $450 million at Christie's in New York. A new record price for any work of art. $450 million for that one painting. November 24th, a mosque attack in Sinai, Egypt kills 305 worshippers and leaves hundreds more wounded. December 5th, Russia is banned from the 2018 Winter Olympics at Pyeongchang by the International Olympic Committee following an investigation into state-sponsored doping. So it's just like Rocky IV. That movie was 100% accurate. December 6th, the United States officially recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital. On the 9th, the Iraqi military announces that it has fully liberated all of Iraq's territory from ISIS terrorist gangs and retaken full control of the Iraqi-Syrian border. December 14th, the Walt Disney Company announces that it will acquire most of the 21st Century Fox, including the 20th Century Fox Film Studio, for $66 billion. We lost some people this year as well, if that wasn't depressing enough for you. 2017 sucked, didn't it? Jesus Christ. All right, here's a short list of all the people we lost. Mary Tyler Moore, January 25th. February 25th, Bill Paxton. March 18th, Chuck Berry. March 20th, David Rockefeller. April 6th, Don Rickles. May 23rd, Roger Moore. If you're a big James Bond fan, you'll remember Roger Moore. June 9th, Adam West, Batman. July 16th, George A. Romero. And anybody that doesn't know who he is a horrible human being. This guy basically created the zombie movie. August 20th, Jerry Lewis. October 2nd, this one hit me. This one actually hit me. We lost Tom Petty, American musician born 1950. He died October 2nd. And then, unfortunately, October 24th, we lost Fats Domino. And November 19th, Charles Manson, American criminal and cult leader born 1934. And that's 2017 in review. You guys sure you want to try for 2018? Well, try to drive like you know each other and keep your front porch lights on, all right? We will survive. All right, we are here with Stephen Phelps, criminology instructor in Temple, Texas. Mr. Phelps, happy to have you on here.
Thank you very much. How are you doing today?
Oh, awesome.
Yes, sir.
Right off the bat, it's like every week we got a new shooting, and I don't know what the hell's going on. There was you probably know these better than well. There was one fairly recently with an elementary school where it seemed like the guy couldn't get in the rooms because it was on lockdown, and then of course before that was the Texas church massacre.
Yep.
Where he just I want to say he executed eight people in the same family. And then just started mowing down the church. I heard, and this one I don't know for sure. I had read it on some random news source, which we never know if it's real or not, with that. But that he hadn't actually targeted the children originally. But then after he had shot everyone that he had wanted to, and even people that he didn't kill, he still, I think, got a bullet in just about every one of them in the church. Mm-hmm. Then the kids start crying from the loud noises of the assault rifle going off. So then he starts picking the kids. Just 1, 2, 3, 4. Outrageous. And then before that was Stephen Paddock in Vegas. Yeah. What's going on? How do we figure this stuff out?
I don't know that you can figure it out. Getting into somebody's mind like that is, kind of like getting into somebody's mind. Why do they choose chocolate icing in comparison to strawberry icing when they like them both? But I think what happened, with the Las Vegas shooting, which is obviously horrific, you had so many people that were impacted by that, and it became such a media sensation anyways. And of course, the media, they'll take a they'll take a cut finger and turn it into open heart surgery. When you had this sudden hypervigilance on it, of shootings, of gun violence, of course, our current political climate and all that stuff, every other incident that then happens becomes hyper exposed. And that's not to belittle the incident that happened in Texas with the church shooting. There's obviously some issues going on there, and that certainly isn't to minimize shooting out there in California. But I think we get additional coverage on that, where these things may obviously not be happening on such a large scale is these these mass shootings, but they're happening often enough. And the question I think becomes, do we try to address these people that are taking out large groups of people all at once, or do we try to address the underlying issue of the 30, 40, 50 people that die every day by various individuals?
Right.
Where are we better set putting our money in our resources, our efforts? As far as those individuals go, I mean, you're going back to the Vegas one. From what I have seen so far, and I don't like watching the normal media outlets right after something like that happens, just because they're just jumping to get their initial reports out. And unfortunately, across all media venues, we see, supposition going out that they have to retract or back up on. That one's really hard. I mean, as far as I know, they've not found any motive for him. They're assuming maybe he had some financial troubles or something like that, but financial troubles translating into taking out, or shooting into a crowd rather, that's significant. I mean, that's a hard one to wrap your head around.
Is this something where we can just kind of put a blanket over it, over all these scenarios, and say, okay, look, if you're doing mass murder, you're crazy, whatever the hell that word really means. But okay, you're crazy, therefore mental health issue. We got to pick up our mental health efforts in the United States, and in doing so, somehow that's going to translate to less mass shootings. I hear people say, well, it's not a gun debate, it's a mental health debate. And I think, yeah, that makes sense to me, but what's the mechanism at the moment you say mental health to this meaning we have less mass shootings? Like, I don't understand. Like, the gun mechanism, I kind of get. Puerto Rico's got what? I mean, like 0 mass shootings or something like that.
Right.
But then at the same time, they have a higher, per capita percentage of homicides. So, I mean, it's like Chicago over there, just without the guns.
Right.
Is this something where we can just go, okay, we gotta work on the crazies, or we got to work on the guns, or like, is there an easy solution, or maybe just one thing we can focus on? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, it's a good question. I think, and I know this is just something that flies in the face of everybody, the folks that nobody can tell me what to do,
yes.
That type of mentality. But really,
America.
When you look at our culture, yeah, I mean, our culture is, look at all the big blockbusters that have come out over the last, I'd venture to say, 5 years. I mean, you have the most recent one for me that stands out. Now, granted, it's an older movie, and I've just gotten kind of tired of watching these movies, is that Superman one that came out. Not the Superman versus Batman. I've not seen that. But that Superman one that comes out, it's not that, Superman, the superhero, gets punched or whatever, or throws something and it hits a car and dents a car. It's something gets thrown and a whole city is leveled. We keep ratcheting up on all these, depictions of violence, and I get it. It's satire, it's for fun. I understand all that. But think about the population that they're targeting. Look at the Transformers movies. I mean, it's junkyards fighting junkyards, and they're so much larger than life, and they recover, and the good guys always seem to win, and whatever struggle there is, it's really shallow and all that. So to say mental health, I mean, it's like, yes, what is mental health? You look at our youth, our kids in elementary and middle school specifically, where they don't really have too many sports activities or stuff like that. They're just getting into that. The teachers complain that the kids are out of control. Well, they don't have recess anymore. And that sounds like a silly thing, give them time to go play. But kids are full of energy. They're full of pent-up energy. And we're not teaching them how to get rid of that energy at those very young ages. It's just learn, teach into a test, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't matter. And the point of that, though, is that we start to diagnose these kids with all these different problems. Back in the 90s, early 2000s, the key to fixing crazy kids was Ritalin. You had a classroom full of zombies. And some people needed Ritalin. Some people have the ADHD, ADD, whatever it is. Some people actually have that. There's no doubt about it. But it became a babysitter drug. And by becoming a babysitter drug, that took away the responsibility of parents, educators, those institutions of social control. It took away their responsibility to have to address the issues at hand. And I think that's what we do. We don't address the issues at hand. We don't teach people how to cope with whatever they have going on in their lives. We joke about millennials. They're so entitled, and people complain about that. The same people that complain about that are the ones that created the problem in the first place. And we don't. We're very narcissistic as a society in that way. As we don't want to take accountability for what we did. It's somebody else's issue. They should just know. So when you look at that and you say, how do you address mental health or mental issues that may lead somebody to be a serial killer or become a mass murderer? I don't know that you can prevent the one-offs, but maybe if we, again, as a society, we're better off at addressing our own issues, we'd be more in tune to seeing the issues that other people are possibly having and be better able to identify them.
So you're thinking this is going to take like a cultural shift, more or less, where whether art depicts life or life depicts art, it's some kind of everything together all at once.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to have to kind of have a communal decision to start thinking differently about violence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thinking differently about a lot of things. I mean, really, it's just accountability, and it's not necessarily violence. I think violence is a symptom of a bigger problem that we have. But it's, think to like the libertarian mentality. Do whatever you want to do as long as it doesn't hurt others, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. But if you're doing everything you want to do without hurting others, are you also then creating a culture for those that look up to you? And that's not to say that we all need to be, toe the line, everybody do the same thing, and that way, we're a bunch of ants marching. But we have to be able to use as a plug for your site. We have to be able to have the right to reason.
It fits in so smoothly, doesn't it?
It works. It works. Some of these things that we have an excuse for everything. Prime example, and I'm going to butcher this. I don't remember who said it, but I just read an article about it the other day. I believe it's Mr. Moore from Alabama, and he's got all these sexual allegations coming out against him or whatever.
Yeah, Roy Moore.
And I'm not.
And the evangelical community comes out in
Yes.
total support of him.
They're saying,
like, what are you doing?
They're saying, the Bible, in the Bible times, it's okay for this to happen. Or it's happened in the past, therefore it must be okay now. Hitler happened in the past. Is that okay to happen now? Pol Pot happened in the past. Is that okay to happen now? The Crusades happened in the past. Is that okay to happen now? Just because it's happened in the past doesn't mean it's okay now. And you're talking about a time where the people's lifespans, 30 years old and you're ancient, 40 years old and, you are almost God yourself. You're so old, It's really comparing apples and oranges, but we have this excuse thing. There's a joke out there. People go out, they sin throughout the week, they go to church on Sunday, they're forgiven, and repeat. It's kind of like that Tom Cruise movie, Live, Die, Repeat. You live, you're bad, forgiveness, repeat. The problem is with that joke is it's real. People do bad things, and they say, well, God will forgive me because I've accepted, Jesus into my life. So there's an excuse. The problem is there's a very large segment of our country, there's a very large segment of our population overall that has this, spiritual foundation with a God, whoever it may be, which is fine. More power to you. But don't use that as an excuse. A false excuse is not a real excuse. It's just that it's an excuse. It doesn't justify anything. But we are very good at excusing things. We're very good at pushing the blame off onto somebody else. They only gave me this. If they only gave me that, well, why didn't you go get it yourself? Work for it. And because of that, that all goes back to, if we're not willing to address the issues at the younger ages within the home, within the society, you're going to continue to have this entitlement thing going on. You're going to continue to have this, it's everybody else's fault. And the only way I know to solve anything is through the most extreme measures possible.
These last couple guys that have been doing this were white guys, right? I hear a lot from the liberal community. You don't want to call it terrorism when it's a white guy. You only want to call it terrorism if it matches the color code chart, like as if you're doing shopping for painting colors, and it's got to be a certain shade of brown, or else it's not a terrorist. I don't know. Like, would you say that it's fair to make that criticism in this scenario? Or
and again, this is something that's perpetuated by media. This may not be something that's actually seen within the justice system, but the media perpetuates it. And when the justice system gets a hold of it, the idea, the coup de grace of our justice system is that, justice is indeed blind. The justice system should be looking at facts. They should be looking at data. They should be looking at what's real. But when a lot of those facts are guided by policies put into place by individuals that are not part of the ruling class, which in our world happens to be white people, there's going to be a bias there, and bias isn't necessarily always wrong. Bias in a way keeps us safe. It's a stereotyping thing. It keeps us safe in a way. But when you look at this, they talk about all these, we need to control gun violence. So where do we look? The inner cities. Well, they're running around and they're killing one person here, one person there, one person here, one person there, which no doubt is an issue. But then it's like if you look at it from a media standpoint, the white people aren't killing anybody, but when they do, they kill a lot of people. So this is not a gun violence problem. This is a mental issue problem. This is a psychological flaw. Maybe they're just crazy like everybody else. The people that are in charge, who overwhelmingly are white, do not like the fact that it could be a white person because they believe that may reflect on them. And that's across the full spectrum. Whether you're conservative, centrist, liberal, it doesn't matter. We don't want to point the lens at ourselves.
If I were to ask anyone something like this, you would be the guy. You study crime for a living. Whenever a terrorist attacks or something, let's say, for example, and we say, all right, well, what is the reason behind this? All right, well, there's the economical reasons, right? Maybe we're taking their oil from their country, or we've set up some kind of base of operations there and they want us out of their way. There's obviously the religious angle. If they're Muslim extremists, we can say, okay, well, they're attacking the West and they don't like their cultures. They want some form of theocracy or something, and they're in a jihad scenario. Or if it's African American, we say, okay, well, what sociological issues that might be behind this sort of thing where, this person needed to rob someone. So we're going to say that we're interested in looking at what kind of stress they were under from financial problems or systemic issues with the police officer that arrested them. Or, like we try to pick this stuff apart. And it's almost like whenever we see something on the news and we see a crime, we all become amateur criminologists, right? In a way. But whenever we're talking about white guys doing mass shootings, is there something systemic, something psychological, something ingrained with the white community, the white American community itself, that makes us more likely to shoot a whole bunch of people?
And again, when you're talking about this stuff, you're talking all theoretical based, so it's very tautological. We can go in circles with it, but I think in the white community, at least in a lot of the white community, in a lot of the, for example, the southern states, the very red states, they have a mentality of our stuff is being taken from us, whatever it may be, whether it be rights, whether it be property, whether it be opportunity, whatever. They have this idea that something's being taken from them. So they start to justify themselves. And I think that's probably the same with people across the spectrum. Anybody that goes out there and is conducting mass shootings to get a point across, or bombings, or whatever the case it may be. But I think that really and truly it's, it goes back to, a entitlement thing. They're taking something from me, whether it's the government, whether it's this group of people. I mean, you look at Timothy McVeigh. He was mad at the federal government, so he decides to attack a federal government building. Never mind the innocent victims, because somebody owed him. He became very self-centered, if you will. South of us in Texas, with the church shooting, he felt he was owed something from his ex-family, as it were. They owed something, so he needed to go provide justice. Same thing apparently with the guy in California. He was mad at his wife for whatever reason, so he shoots her, and at that point, I mean, he kind of snaps. The floodgates open, and he just goes around taking people out. To take it away momentarily from the idea of it being white people, think back to, what was it, 2002, 2001, 2002, 2003, somewhere in there. I think I could be totally off on that. When we had the DC shootings, and you had the guys out there in Washington DC, acting as snipers from the trunk of their car. They were mad at things. They wanted to show the world that something needed to happen, and to whatever end, it doesn't really matter. But I think it goes back to an entitlement thing. We feel like somebody owes us something, so we feel like we're justified. And if we feel like we're justified, it doesn't matter what the law says, and especially when you get people that start getting into that martyrdom syndrome. I don't care if I die. Well, that's where it gets really dangerous, because at that point, you have nothing to lose. So what are you going to do? Shoot me? I wasn't scared anyways.
Maybe it's attached to the amount of mayonnaise white people consume, or dance abilities. It could be. You got to do some work on that as part of the criminology of America.
Yeah. Well, it's like the joke we like to say, and that's, you're kind of hitting on something right there. When the media gets a stat and then they blow it out of proportion, the best ones that the best example I've seen is where you see somebody look at investments, the stock market, for example, and they say, well, the stock market is crashing. And you look at it and they show you this graph and it's this, almost an exponential drop, from left to right, the line's just going down. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. But what they're doing is they're looking at a 1 week, 2 week, 3 month window, and the time frame, is broken out by days or hours even sometimes. But if you zoom back and you go out to like a year-long trend or a 2-year trend or a 10-year trend even, it's actually part of an upswing. It's just your normal up and down. It's kind of like a heartbeat. When the line goes down on an EKG monitor, it doesn't mean your heart stopped. It means it's on its downward spike before it does its pumping spike, and it's okay. One of the things I like to joke about is, I'll use it as an example in classes, is in satire, ice cream is obviously responsible for more homicides. And the idea being, you can see ice cream sales go up in the summer, which is also the time that more violent crimes and homicides happen. Therefore, ice cream must be the cause.
Is that true?
And
Ice cream sales go up?
Well, they're correlated, but one is not a causation of the other. But all that's really happening is summertime, people are staying out more. So they're putting themselves into situations. You have longer days, that's people are getting out of school, out of college on their summer breaks. You get a lot of the youth out there, acting like youth. And some of them, they can't control their emotions and they have access to weapons or propensity for violence, wherever the case may be. So more people get hurt, more people get harmed, violent acts, more people get killed. At the same time, summer comes along, it gets hotter, ice cream sales go up because people of all ages tend to like ice cream. Doesn't have anything to do with the other, but it's you can take stuff and you can draw correlations, but they're not really causations, and that's one of the things that the media likes to do. So using the example of we need to start looking at how mayonnaise impacts things. Well, the media tries to do that at times.
That's fascinating, really. Like, I'm like, let me make a completely random joke about this. And you're like, that's exactly what's happening with our media.
It is. I mean, they look at the wrong things sometimes.
So in reference to terrorism, my listeners have probably wonder this as well. I know I do all the time. Okay, so I got a list. Supposed to be the top 10 terrorist attacks. I don't know what they're basing it on, body count or what have you. Maybe familiarity with the public. Bombing USS Cole. Anthrax letter attacks. Remember those? They killed like 5 people with that one. Salmonella attacks. I didn't even know that was a thing. Yeah. Holy smoke. Mid-air bombing. Pan Am Flight 103. Bombing of Marine barracks. Truck bombing of the USS or U.S. embassies. Beslan massacre. Holy smoke. That's 366 fatalities, over 700 injured. Boy, if it doesn't happen here in the States, it's almost like we don't hear about it. That is fascinating. Oklahoma City federal bombing, federal building, First World Trade Center bombing, and then of course the second time that those same towers were hit. And we see this. If you're in this generation, you've grown up in terrorism. If you're in the last generation, you've seen it certainly escalate from the 90s. I would think, right? If that would be a fair time to start looking at that.
It depends what you want to look at as terrorism.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about, like all the drone bombings. I mean, our last president, we like to point at Trump, and he is such an easy target. Like, right. Lord. But we look at our last president and say, well, this guy, he was classy. He was a good talker. He was a silver-tongued orator, if you will. And then we say, yeah, but this guy that won the Nobel Peace Prize was bombing the shit out of everybody with drones. Yep. I had heard Noam Chomsky even reference that, where he says, what makes you think that shooting, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, if it was actually Noam Chomsky saying it, we'd all be asleep before he got to the end of the sentence. Right. But he said something along the lines of, what makes you think that droning someone isn't terrorist? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that in particular. Could they be thinking over there that we're the terrorists?
I want to kind of set the stage to make my argument right, because if you're a drug dealer and you're an adult, so obviously, you're going to go to prison if you get caught with a bunch of drugs. So who do you recruit to run your drugs for you on the street corner? You're going to look to kids. Oftentimes you're looking to your own family and stuff like that, cousins or people in your neighborhood, whatever the case may be. And we talk about the watch out in middle school, because that's where the gangs can start recruiting the kids and stuff like that. Certainly in high school, because in high school, especially for guys, they're trying to show off and be the best guy in the world, and it's kind of a cool thing if you're tough, or whatever the case may be, and so you start recruiting the high school kids. High school kids, you're looking at the ages of 15, 16, 17, 18 time frame. So 16 years old. And I'm going with 16 for a very specific reason. It was 16 years, 2 months that 9/11 happened. So say you were born that day in Iraq or in Afghanistan or in Pakistan or any of these Arab countries that we decided we're going to blame everybody for. We'll leave Saudi Arabia out of that. That's a different conversation. So you're born, and the United States, very shortly after 9/11, starts going into your country, your home. Now you're an infant, so you don't really know anything about what the hell's happening. You're ignorant, justifiably. But you grow up, in your whole life, you're now 16. All you've known is that the U.S. is out there. We're randomly bombing cities. We're shooting stuff up. We're destroying things. Unfortunately, we do have soldiers that have gone over there and committed crimes just because we're people and we can't control everybody, and some people can't control themselves. So now you're 16 years old. You're the one that, if you're in the States, we need to watch out for getting recruited into some, drug dealer regime or whatever the case may be. But you're overseas, and you've had family members die. You've had friends and family who have had other people they know die at the hands of the United States. Sometimes, yeah, that was a bad person in my family that died. Yeah, that person was, they were shooting at people. I understand why they got shot. But unfortunately, there's, in any type of conflict situation, you have collateral damage. And maybe a person didn't get killed, but your school got destroyed, or your church, your mosque, or whatever it may be. Something that you had an attachment to gets destroyed. Are you looking at the United States as saviors? If you look at, we'll use in the United States our definition, the one that we'll say that the FBI goes by for terrorism. And it's really hard to pin down an individual definition of terrorism. But when you look at federal regulations, the CFR, terrorism well, as you said, I'm paraphrasing, it's basically using force when you're not supposed to, force through violence, threat, intimidation. And you're going against people, property, things that mean something to folks. And you're trying to intimidate government or civilians or whatever, or any segment of a national or group population to try to get your goals pushed forward, whether that be political, whether that be social, or whatever. That's a very paraphrased definition, but it's kind of what the FBI uses. Well, what the hell are we doing in the Middle East? We are trying to push our goals forward. We're trying to push our objectives forward. The United States is known for trying to insert governments or influence governments. Oh, heaven forbid Russia did it to us. We're not so subversive when we do it. We actually go in and we, fund the killing of people or whatever the case may be. But we go out there and do that. So now you're 16 and you've seen this happening all around you. And then you have somebody come up to you, somebody that maybe that maybe you trust, who was around, and maybe they were 16 when 9/11 happened, so they're now 32. And they say, hey, we need to fight this problem. So now you are a recruit. In the same vein, you're 16 in the United States now. All you've ever known is that we're at war with the terrorists. And at 16 is around the time that the military recruiters are starting to recruit you. Maybe not actively, but they're starting to target their advertisements to you because they want you when you're 17, 18, or 19 to sign up and join the military to fight these evil terrorists who are out there, harming the civilian population, threatening world disorder. It's not a secret how we do this. It's just, do we want to see that we're actually doing this? So to call them terrorists, they're just soldiers. In their minds, they're not a terrorist. We're the terrorists. We go over there and we do these things. And the irony of it all is we look at them and we say, well, they're terrorists, running around in the back of their trucks, shooting off guns, growing their terrorist beards out, drinking alcohol, and they're trying to control women and subjugate women and all this stuff. And then the people in Iraq and Afghanistan, they're doing the same thing. Because, I was talking about the people of the United States. We like to grow our terrorist beards out. We like to, shoot our guns, ride around in the back of our trucks and subjugate women. Well, wait a second. You just turned our definition on ourselves is what I'll get. It's like, well, it's our definition. Should we not own it? That's a societal change that needs to happen somehow. We need to recognize who we are first before we start looking at other people. When we talk about terrorism, going off of that definition, the one that the FBI kind of goes off of, I'm certainly not the expert by any stretch on religion, but they had these things called the Crusades. They said, well, we want people to believe in our God. And they were just fine with having fairly recently before that separated from what we then considered pagan gods, which they were all part of at one point, but they just said, wait a second, our idea is a little bit better now. We've refined our story. So we're going to go and ask people to convert. And if they don't convert, in other words, if they don't acquiesce to our demands, we're just going to have to kill them. That is, by every definition, terrorism. I am pushing my social or political motives onto a population that does not want them. And now because the Christianity, Catholicism, however you want to break it down, is the most dominant religion out here in the United States, we choose not to look at that stuff. Going back to the Mr. Morse situation, where the evangelicals, or at least some of them, have come out saying, "Well, no, it's okay because that used to happen." I believe it's again, I'm not the expert in the Bible and stuff like that, but I know for a fact, I want to say it's in Leviticus somewhere. If the kids don't listen to the parents, they should be stoned at the city gates. Well, how literal do you want to take the Bible? Do you want to say we should listen to the Bible, or do you want to say that we shouldn't? And some people say, well, this is a literal translation, or this is just a guide. And it's okay if you look at it as just a guide. Don't go to the literal translations. It's kind of, you can have a glass of water, but to drink the water, you need the glass.
It's literal whenever we're talking about the gays.
Yeah, and ultimately, if I am in fact a sinner, does it matter to you? You're not my judge. You're certainly not going to be judging me at the pearly gates. So what does it matter to you? If I'm not impacting you because I'm offending your sensibilities, well, what if you're offending mine? But if I'm not religious, my opinion doesn't matter.
Let me preface this here. Like, you see crime through the eyes of the psychologist, right? Where we just see it through Fox News or CNN or ABC. You know what I mean? And
I'd rather couch it. I would see crime more through an academic side, and I have worked in the field. On the civil side, but I've worked in the field, so I see it from the practitioner side.
Okay, fair enough. But you know better than we do what these guys are thinking, at least why they're thinking it, or maybe how we can categorize whether crime's going to happen this way or that way, or to which victim, or who's more likely to become a criminal or not, maybe, and these sort of things. Are there some tips that you could throw out to the listeners to avoid becoming a victim, or is there like a mindset that we should have? How do we maybe just live our lives a little bit safer?
You got to use a lot of common sense when it comes to the victimology type stuff. I do agree with the fact that I call it a fact. I do agree with the idea that crime is going to happen. You are not going to be able to stop crime. We all, in the criminal justice field, we all work to that end with the realization that we're never going to get there. So we have to kind of change the focus of how do we manage crime, because it's just going to happen. People violate the rules. I mean, in pop culture, we like to say rules are made to be broken. Well, no, they're not. But rebellious attitudes actually have progressed our nation and humanity itself in a lot of good ways. And I don't want to ever put the idea out there that somebody did something or did not do something that caused them to be a victim. The criminal's responsible for their action, no doubt. But in trying to understand a criminal, you have to first understand that many times they don't have the type of self-control, or they don't have the type of value system that you or I may have. And to compound that, they may also not have the self-control and the value system. So if they're missing a combination of the two, they're just more likely to victimize those that they see as a easy target, a suitable target. Most criminals, they're not going after somebody bigger than them. So that doesn't mean everybody should go work out and become big, incredible Hulks or anything like that. I mean, that's just not feasible. But it's kind of like if you had to walk home at night, is it better to walk on the dark side of the street or the side of the street that has the street lights? Criminals are weak people overall, mentally. They can't figure stuff out the way the rest of society can. When people talk about criminals, look at some of the leaders we have in, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in politics, whether military, whatever. We got some real duds out there, and if they could make it without breaking laws, and of course some of them do, but if they could make it without breaking laws, then anybody can make it without breaking laws. So you have to take responsibility for what do you know to be wrong. If you're in an area where the hair is standing up on the back of your neck, well, maybe you ought to leave that area. Don't get the attitude, well, I don't have to leave. Well, no, you don't. You don't have to be a victim either. It's your choice. One of the largest groups of victims that we have in the United States are females, unfortunately. And it's because guys are overall weak. So we go after people that are even weaker than us, because that way we can say, oh yeah, we're badasses, which is a fallacy, of course. We talk about females, and females oftentimes carry a purse. Well, what's in the purse? If you're carrying your purse with it open, somebody can look in there when they're passing by you, and should they see some items in there they want to take, well, you're more likely to have it taken because you had it out and exposed. And that's for anybody. One of the examples I use is, do you leave your purse or a laptop or anything of value visible in your car? And most people would agree, no, you don't do that, because, that just entices somebody to break in. And that's absolutely right. When people go out in there, again, going to the females, to pick on the females a little bit, and they're scantily clad, well, you have those people that have the propensity to look at you as trash or as not worthy of being a human being, and they then start to see you as an object and they act accordingly. I was recently talking with somebody who was down in Austin at a restaurant, and an incident happened where a homeless guy got kicked out of the restaurant, even though he had paid for his food or had his food paid for him or whatever the case may be. And she was kind of upset about that, at the way he was treated and the way one of the managers asked. So she has to speak to a different manager. And when he's talking to her, and it's one of those restaurants where all the girls are half naked.
Yeah, like a Hooters or something
like that. Yeah,
it
was something like that. It's not bikinis. It's the one next to it, but it's also owned by bikinis or something like that. And bikinis, I've never been, but I can only assume how they're dressed. He was referring to, I'm not worried about my male staff, but I got to look after my girls. And he kept referring to the girls as my girls, my ladies, my women. That hints at an insidious type thing that is ingrained into us. Women are our property. Women are our objects. Women should bow down to men, which I don't agree with. I don't want that. I don't want people to say, "Oh, this guy thinks women are property." I certainly do not. But it's the idea that's out there, and you see it in nearly everything. My wife and I were watching a movie last night, and they have this scene where it didn't add anything to the movie, but they showed a woman's essentially bare butt. And my wife, said, "Well, that one was for the guys," and she's right. There's no point. They had some actors in their male actors that the women would say are attractive men. They never had their clothes off, and it's like, why did we have to show the woman's butt? It didn't add to the story. It didn't add comic relief. It didn't increase the brevity of the plot. It was just a woman's butt. And my wife, I firmly believe she's right. There, we sold something for the guys. You can't watch a show any now without having to have your token sex scene. We used to joke, the token black guy. South Park, I love it. They had the black guy, the black kid in there named Token, and it's because they're making fun of the fact that the blacks were not allowed to be there. You only use them for certain things to the affirmative action check mark or whatever. And well, it's turned into token sex scenes. The point of all that is, we put this idea out there of this is how women are supposed to be. This is how they're supposed to serve us as men. And to answer your question, how do you protect yourself? If you're a female, be mindful of how you're dressing, and not you could dress however you want, but just understand that dressing however you want is going to have people looking at you a certain way, for better or worse. Does not matter. You just need to understand that. It's even when you go to work. They tell you when you go to work, it's like a business idea. Always dress for the position you want to have. So you should always dress well and dress to be your supervisor type thing, because you want people to judge you that way. Just the same, if you're going to your job and you're dressed not appropriate for work, people are going to judge you as such. It's just part of the game. And with guys, guys, we need to get off this idea that, oh, you insulted me, so I must handle this with force. If a guy comes up to me and, they say something about my mom. Now, if they know my mom, that might actually offend me, because if you know my mom, you're not going to say anything bad about her. If you don't know my mom and you're talking trash about my mom, well, that's just the same thing as me talking trash about the view that's blocked at some house in Australia that I've never been to because of a tree. Well, I have no basis to talk about that. I have no business talking about that. So why would you pay me any mind? When people talk about things they don't know as a guy, because this is typically a guy's issue, we can't take offense to it. Let it slide off your shoulders. If somebody cuts you off, yeah, they're an ass. Let them go. Forget about it. But we get into these things where we need to suddenly start bowing up and getting crazy with people. And it's, guys, we need to just calm the hell down. A classic example is, for fun, just to get out there and into the world, I play on a kickball team. And I know what that sounds like. Kickball, that's a 5th grade sport. It absolutely is. And it is so much fun as an adult, because you just realize how fun it was as a kid. There's no national kickball league. Kickball is not an Olympic sport. Kickball is not something where I'm going to get recruited to some mythical kickball team and make millions and millions of dollars. It's kickball, for God's sakes. We've played against teams that get so upset the police have had to be called out to the fields because they're wanting to fight people over kickball. Really? And the people that were getting all uppity about it were the guys. We have to get off of this idea that everything must be fighting words. Everything must be something that's going to cause me to have to represent or, to stand up for what I believe. I mean, stand up for what you believe, don't get me wrong. But if what you believe is that the umpire made a bad call in kickball, maybe you need to reassess your belief system, or your coping skills at least. To not be a victim, be smart about what you're doing. Be smart about what would people think of you. If you judge people, keep in mind other people are judging you, and we all judge people. So you have to think, how am I being judged? You know, they like to say you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that's kind of true. If you are your own weakest link, be aware of that. Nobody owes anybody anything, least of all respect. Be aware of that. Should we give respect? I believe so. But nobody owes it to me. Nobody owes it to anybody else. But we forget that. And the biggest thing to keep yourself safe, to keep yourself from being a victim, is be aware of your surroundings. Be aware of how your actions may be perceived. Most of all, don't be afraid to call for help if you need it. If you get into that situation where you need help, it's not a matter of, well, I can figure this out. Call for help. People help people. I really believe that by and large, people are good people.
I always try to raise my daughter with an awareness of feminism and philosophical thinkers and the movement for women's rights, like Simone de Beauvoir. And, you know, of course, she's only 12, but I try to talk to her about what kind of things to look forward to in this life that's kind of fucked up, right? And I say, whenever you're getting older, like, you got to start thinking, when you go out, are you planning on solving all the world's problems that night? Or are you dealing with a bunch of animals? You know, so you're going to want to dress like there's lots of animals out there. I think if you're at a safe environment and around people that you trust, sure, you can let loose a little bit. Hopefully she'll never hear this recording. But the roofie epidemic is insane right now. And hell, I've been roofied. You know, people think only women can be roofied. Like it happens all the time. But you look at this and you say, okay, you have to accept that you're dealing with animals out there. Don't take a drink from a glass that you didn't order yourself, that you haven't had your eyes on this whole time. And it's weird to say that's how you have to live, even whenever you're trying to go out and relax and have a good time at a club or a bar. But you're dealing with a bunch of animals. And yeah, I got to agree with you 100%. And I wanted to ask you also, not just in scenarios where we're out in public, but what about like in our own private life? Are there things that maybe criminals look at? Like if they're looking at my house, for example, I've always wanted to put like a whole bunch of different security signs all around my home. I would be less likely to rob someone, I would think, if I saw this house is protected by surveillance or, you know, something like that. Or yeah, I'm a gun owner. You know, I believe in we need some gun regulations, of course, but that doesn't mean that if you come in my house, I'm not going to turn you into Swiss cheese. Should I have a sticker on my front door that says, if you're past this property line, you're not a visitor, you're a target, or, you know, something like that? Or what kind of tips can we do for at least our homes?
I would always recommend for people, never put how much you love guns on display, because if I'm wanting to break into your house, it's not hard for me to figure out when you are or are not home. I just need to sit down the block from you for a week and I'll know your schedule pretty well, you know, especially if you're over 25 years old, you probably have a fairly standard schedule, you know, so I'll know when you're home, when your family's home, when they're not home. If you're that guy that runs around, you know, with the come and take it flag and all the NRA stickers and the family of, you know, AR-15s and pistols on the back of your vehicle or whatever the case may be, oh, I want to break into your house. There's a good market out there for illegal guns. And when it says come and take it, that by all means is an invitation. Because as soon as you're gone, I will come and take it. There's no question about it. One of the things, if it's somebody that's going to break into a house that's over the age of 15, in other words, they have some experience in life, if you have a thing that says protected by whatever an alarm company is, that's
ADT
or something. Something like that, I'm going to go to your windows, and before I open your window, I'm going to look around this window seal. And the reason is because there's magnetic sensors, just like, you know, the little ding-dong things when you open a door to a business. And that's what the alarm system is. And if I can see one of those, you probably do have an alarm system. But then the next thing I'm going to think to myself is, where am I? You know, if I'm in the middle of, you know, a city, I may not want to break in. Just because the idea is that the cops are going to be able to get there really fast. But if I'm out in the county or somewhere where there's not a lot of police activity to begin with, you know, I may sit there and think to myself, I only plan on being in the house long enough to get the TV or get into the bedroom and get the guns, and then I'm out of here anyways. It may be a risk I'm willing to take. There's a show that was, or a series of interviews, I want to say it was ABC, I may be wrong with that, where they actually interviewed a burglar. You can Google it, I'm sure, and find it. It was syndicated, so it was on all the different stations throughout the country. They talk about the things that people can and cannot do. I'm making a broad assumption here, of course. One of the things that people would like, you know, if you own a home, is to have the outside of your house look nice. Well, if you put a bunch of shrubs up that block your windows, I would just say thank you, because you've given me a way in where I can't be seen from the street. Of course, some people say, well, that means I have to have no landscaping out there. Well, you can just have trees and cut them high. But it's these little things that thieves and burglars look at. One of the things, people often say is, well, I have security lights all around my house. Well, and that's great, but if I'm going to break into your house, I'm probably going to do it during the day. More likely than not, that's what I'm trying to do, because I don't want to have a confrontation with, I want to be able to get in and get out, and I'm going in during the day when you're at work, kids are at school, and I don't have to see anyone. Now, I say that, and just last night or the night before, there was a 3 a.m. home invasion here in the city of Temple. Obviously, the family was home, so that can happen. But by and large, if I'm looking to burglarize you, I'm looking daytime. That's me, because I don't want to go to prison. I'm not built for prison, so I'm going to do it during the day. You can get a dog. That's probably a really good defense if you keep the dog inside, because just a dog barking will oftentimes dissuade folks. However, most dogs, I don't care how well trained they are, most dogs are very susceptible to the hot dog trick. Give them a hot dog, you own them. When I used to do investigations with the state, we'd go to places where we had to get on the property and there'd be dogs out there. We almost always had, doggy treats or hot dogs with us just so we could toss them out and distract the dogs. And once you give them a treat, they're your best friend. They're very shallow animals, despite what people say. Yeah, if I'm wanting to break into your home, I'm not looking for the alarm system signs. And a lot of people actually have those out there without actually having alarm systems. And it's just, maybe you bought a house that had an alarm system, so they had the sign out there, but you chose not to reinstate the service. Do you throw the sign away, or do you leave it out there like, well, maybe it'll keep somebody away? People say, well, lock your doors, which I agree, you should lock your doors, especially when you're home, because that way if somebody's breaking in, you at least have the potential of hearing them before they get in. But a locked door only keeps an innocent person out. If a burglar wants in, there's windows, there's feet to the door, you can kick a door in fairly easily. It's not going to stop the motivated offender. If you have a fenced backyard, I'm just going to jump the fence and go in the backyard. I get to take my time that way. But of course, that doesn't mean don't have a fenced backyard. Perhaps you have a pool in your backyard and you don't want people driving by seeing, well, you said you have a daughter. If you have a pool, do you want some random stranger driving by and seeing your daughter out there? You may not want that. So a fenced backyard is probably something you want. From a burglary standpoint, that's how I'm getting in.
Wow.
Yeah. The truth is, you're not going to stop a motivated offender. You're just not going to do it. They're going to go for what they want. Whether or not they're successful is the question, but they're going to go for what they want.
I really appreciate your time today, and I know I've learned a lot. I'm sure the listener has too. I guess if there's a takeaway, ice cream causes mass murder.
That's right.
Let me see if I get this right. There's no way to avoid getting robbed because it's happening either way. So at some point you said Bush did 9/11.
Yeah, I believe so. That's what I understood.
Stephen Phelps, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you have a good rest of your morning.
Yes, sir. You too. Thanks for having me.
Wasn't Stephen Phelps cool? I really enjoyed that. I can't speak for him, but if he were still here, I think he'd want you to support the show. I don't know that for sure, but maybe. If you are able to help our message reach more people, please head on over to patreon.com/right and make a difference in some children's lives today, specifically my children. They had a rough Christmas, all right? I didn't get them shit. They need your help. Sorry. But no, seriously, patreon.com/right. All joking aside, I believe in what we're doing here, folks, and I think we could be much more effective if we work together. Patreon.com/right. Saying it 3 times, just like marketing says you're supposed to. If you're not able to make a financial investment, no problem. Rate us on iTunes. Hey, could a couple of you guys write a review for me on there? That would be really helpful. And don't forget to share us with your friends on social media as well. Find out more at therighttoreason.com. Music brought to you by A Lost State of Mind. Next week, I will be talking to a libertarian. That's right, a libertarian. That should be interesting, and you better get your Ayn Rand jokes ready. Between now and then, keep fighting for your right to reason.